So, welcome again, everybody. It's our fourth session. I had some questions from last week that I want to touch on. One was around the energy of disgust. And the question was around a type of behavior, and it was expressing disgust towards drunk people. And this could apply to people who smoke or people who do have certain patterns of behavior that we feel judgy about it. And I recognize that about myself because this is definitely something that I've been writing. What I'll do is I'll read my response to this. When I was addicted to alcohol, one of the things that I really wanted to do, and I knew about the addiction, was that it was very unhealthy for me. Even though I liked it very much, I wanted it to be gone. And the only way I knew how to make it disappear at that time was to be disgusted by it. So I'd learned to hate it. I taught myself how to be turned off by the alcohol, or turned off by smoking, the smell of smoke. And so I trained a new type of behavior into myself so that I would become repulsed by it. And in being repulsed by it, my addiction would then go away, that behavior. I would be repulsed by my own behavior. Now, whilst this may work for a lot of people, it worked for me in terms of being able to stop the addiction. It never stopped the feelings of wanting to party, of wanting to drink, of some people wanting to smoke, because all it did was it creates a new emotional loop. So I never really addressed the core of what created the addiction in the first place. And so what really created the addiction in the first place was my sense of not feeling free at its core, not being able to express myself fully, who I was, my truth, and to be okay if I wasn't accepted by other people about expressing that truth. And so what happens is you kind of create this emotional loop. I created this loop where I was disgusted by my addiction, which was trapping fear, shame, and other forms of disgust. And so that's why really addictions are so hard to unpack and de-layer themselves. The other question was, is that disgust kind of protecting us? And is that healthy? Like, if we're feeling like it is protecting us. And in a way, it is kind of protecting us from going into that pattern of addiction again, right? Because this is now our new tool that we have learnt to cope with this addiction. And so now we're holding on to this new condition, this new thing that we've created for ourselves. And so if we actually let that go, the risk is that we fall back into the addiction. And this is also why addictions are so easy to fall back into. And the thing is that we don't really do the core work. And the core work for me would be actually to feel more deeply into the addiction, to become intimate with the feeling that's behind it. What happened in my life? How was I hurt? How was I wounded that caused me to turn to this addiction? What was it? Was it about, when it comes to smoking, was it about being accepted by a group of friends? Was it about rebelling against my parents? Was it about needing to be seen to be cool, like blend in with the cool group? Now it's not very cool, but back in the 1980s, it was quite cool. So that was a question that came up. Some more feedback was just to, through these sessions, integrate more tools and exercises. And I really liked that idea. I sort of shied away from it at first because I felt like we needed to build a little bit more language into this whole thing, but now is a perfect time to start bringing in more tools and exercises. So we're going to start doing some of this. And part of my reluctance before in diving more into exercises was when I was doing this in the corporate space, I already had people crying in the room just listening to me speak. And that was their edge, just being in that room. And so it's nice to get a little bit of a taster, I sense, into this before we begin to really dive more deeply into the exercises. Then another point was raised on a topic to talk to, which was on the element of control, and to dive deeper into how we have been controlled via our emotions. So this series ultimately ends up with that understanding. Whether we get there today, I'm not sure with this hour, but they're all steps to really understand how we've been controlled so that we can regain that sense of freedom and that feeling of freedom. Does anyone have any other questions from the last sessions? Yes.
I just had a follow-on question from that piece on addiction.
Yes.
So once you've asked the question, what's happened in my life, to cause the addiction, whatever that might be, was it to be accepted? Was it to be rebellious? Was it to be cool or whatever? So once you've established what that is, what then do you do with that?
We will go into that probably 2 sessions from now. Okay. A whole series of tools, exercises, some of which today we'll touch on. And I call it reclaiming our fire. It's a reclaiming of our sovereignty exercise, which we will get to probably 2 sessions from now. Any other questions? Okay. Last week we spoke to emotional weaponization and how emotions have been used against us for the purposes of controlling us, taking away our sovereignty. Now, I said last week that our protection to others hurting us with their emotions, with their projected emotions. Our protection was to create walls around our heart, create a castle, to go numb, to have all of these different types of defenses of rebellion, of going numb, of disassociation, of being a Bambi and running away. All of these different types of walls and coping mechanisms to protect ourselves. Now, in letting go of these notions of protection and really surrendering ourselves and getting very vulnerable to attack, to being hurt by attack, I find it necessary to bring back a form of protection. So like we're getting rid of this old way of protecting ourselves. But it's important for us to reintroduce a new way of emotional protection, a more healthy way, I would say. And I sort of call it emotional disarmament. And the best way I can relate this whole theme to is in the martial arts world, because in the martial arts world, this has been explored so much. And you think about martial arts and hand-to-hand combat. And you think about someone who's trained. They're able to defend themselves. They're able to work with punches that are thrown. They're able to defend themselves and defend other people. They're able to throw punches. They're able to basically work with whatever's being, whatever they're confronted with, right? They're not defenseless. They're empowered. And this is the type of concept that I really want to bring back when we think about emotions and how how emotions have been weaponized against us, is that most of us are walking around quite defenseless. And so there's one perspective that I want to talk to in the martial arts world, because a lot of people sort of think about martial arts as like this very macho, very strong, like MMA, I'm just going to beat the crap out of you type energy. The martial arts I'm referring to, that I studied for a long time, is not about looking at your opponent as though they are an enemy. It's looking at them like they're a dance partner. And so it's as though you are actually doing a dance, a really intimate dance. Whatever type of sparring that you're encountering, whatever type of punches are being thrown, to view that as a dance. And that slightly changes our internal processing of divisiveness or of hatred, just slightly. When we can see someone who's really trying to hurt us, trying their damn hardest to hurt us, and here we are, we're sort of looking at them and saying, you're not my opponent. I'm not here to fight you. I accept that we're here to dance, and we will dance, and we'll dance intimately, right? And it starts to change this whole perspective of ours that we've been taught about polarity. Me versus other person. Win, lose, right? Control and domination versus slavery. It's like we start to introduce more capacity to bring love into the equation. And I'll describe martial arts from an emotional fighting perspective as development in certain stages. Okay, and some of these stages we've spoken about, actually, stages 1, 2, and 3. But I hope that this will sort of bring things back around full circle. So stage 1 in martial arts is like just knowing mentally how to punch and kick and block and wrestle even. You can see it, you can kind of visualize yourself without actually even doing the exercise, that a punch looks like this, that a kick looks like that wrestling looks like this. You mentally can understand and associate this image with a thought pattern. And so in emotional intimacy, a stage 1 expert in emotions is like, we understand emotions mentally. We know what the primary emotions are. We can label some secondary emotions. We can describe what healthy and unhealthy look like. So I want to go into some exercises now. And in your own time, I just want you to think about and answer, if possible, the questions that I'm going to pose to you. The first question is, What are the 7 primary emotions? Can you name them?
Is that a question?
Yes.
Fear, shame, anger, disgust, hatred. Somebody else help me with 2 more.
Joy and sadness.
I'm surprised.
Yes. Beautiful. Excellent.
Joy and sadness.
Yeah. And the ones that we come up with first are generally the ones that we've probably felt and used more in our day-to-day. The second question is, what are some secondary emotions? Now, I know we haven't really talked too much about secondary emotions, but secondary emotions are combinations of the primary emotions. For instance, fear and anger, the combination of that would be something like jealousy. So in your mind, just think about some secondary emotions. And when you're ready, let's call some out.
Would a secondary emotion be one that potentially you feel before you feel like the primary one? So you're feeling maybe, anxious because you're ashamed. Is that it?
Anxious would be more of a loop. The makeup of the secondary emotions at its core is the primary ones all sort of wrapped in together. So it would be like guilt. I'm feeling guilty, which is sort of shame. You're feeling sort of like ashamed for something, but you're also scared. So there's some fear there. So it's like I'm sort of scared and I'm feeling a bit ashamed. Any others?
I had like disappointment.
Yep.
And I think it's disgust and shame.
Yeah, some of that, yep.
And also like frustration, and that's more like anger.
Yes.
In combination with disgust or shame maybe also.
Yes. Yep.
And like doubt is fear and and another one. I don't know.
Yeah. There can be a little bit of surprise there, like sort of, you're sort of doubting something. It could be a little bit of, fear. Now, the point of this exercise is not necessarily to list all of the secondary emotions. It's really, for me, very important to understand the primaries. The secondaries, it's not necessarily about being able to label them all, but to be able to dissect them into primary emotions. Because often, like, you use the word doubt, and it's this feeling you get, and it's not initially a primary emotion that we're all very familiar with. It's like, it could be some confusion here, right? It's like, I'm sort of, there's like this hesitation as well, and you kind of don't really know what you're feeling, but initially. But if you start diving into the energy of doubt and looking at it from the perspective of primary emotions, you start to be able to dissect the confusion. You start to unravel it and unpack it. So like, let's say jealousy. It's like, I'm feeling jealous right now. What can we do with the jealousy? Well, let's firstly learn to unpack that into its primary emotions. What does jealousy have? Well, often it comes with a lot of anger. I'm angry at this. I'm sort of like, someone's done something to, like, my partner has cheated on me with someone else. I'm feeling a bit angry, right? I'm also feeling a little scared because it's bringing up things that are like, well, like, I'm scared of this person leaving me, right? It can bring up some doubt too. And it's often got a lot of sadness there that's wrapped in, right? There may be a little bit of surprise, and very often it's jam-packed full of, then consequently, disgust and shame. So part of me is, the energy of shame has this pride attached onto the other side of it, and our pride, it takes a hit. And we're sort of disgusted by the activity. And so just that one word, jealousy, has a lot of components to that once we are able to unravel that, we start bringing clarity to the different emotions that we need to address within ourselves. Addressing just jealousy as a package is very difficult, and so what the purpose of unraveling this whole thing is to feel out let's go back to the basics, primary emotions here. The next exercise here is, can you describe what some healthy and unhealthy behaviors look like in response to anger? What does healthy look like in terms of an expression of anger? What does unhealthy look like as an expression of anger?
A healthy response would just be setting a boundary, and an unhealthy, I'll just say rage.
Yep.
Which just goes way beyond what the situation really called for.
Yep. Totally agree. Any other comments to anger?
I would go numb when my angry alcoholic father policeman would rage at me. I would just numb and go shut down.
Yep.
So not likely a healthy response.
Yep.
Would I like to the numbing? It's like is a way of suppression, to suppress the anger, and then you like have the pot principle where the kettle will boil over after a while because there's too much suppressed anger or any other emotion.
Yep, that's right. And in some instances, like let's say using the example of a policeman father beating his own son, for the son to express anger in that moment, it's challenging, because if he tries to stand up for himself, the likelihood is he's gonna get beaten even more. So the coping mechanism there to keep himself safe is gonna be very likely that to shut up. Can you describe now, moving on to fear, what healthy and unhealthy fear looks like? Healthy and unhealthy behaviors to fear.
For fear, I would say like unhealthy is that you ignore it or run away from it, and a healthy way is to like lean into your fear and figure out what it is about.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it seems like a healthy is self-preservation. Like your fear is well understood because there's a danger in front of you, so you're protecting yourself, getting out of there, doing what you need to do.
Yep.
Unhealthy fear for me was reacting to that fear out of anger. So I'd get really angry at somebody else, and just getting angry, and then trying to change that situation. So if it was a father or somebody else, a partner that was causing something to trigger fear in me, I would then try to change their behavior. Stop them from drinking, stop them from raging, get them to Alcoholics Anonymous. I tried everything. So I'm a Mr. Fix-It when it comes to feeling fear sometimes.
Yep. Yep. Which is almost all men in this day and age. Moving on to the next one, shame. What are some healthy and unhealthy behaviors in response to shame?
So for shame, healthy response would be the realization of an error if one had in fact caused another discomfort or unhappiness or pain, and apologizing. Unhealthy would be defensiveness, so getting defensive and not being able to hear.
Yep. Yep.
I would like to add, like, to the unhealthy way of dealing with shame is that you blame yourself as a person, and not the action that led to the shame.
Yes. Yep. Self-blame.
Yeah, unhealthy for me was the inner critic coming up and telling me I was not worthy. And so then I would drink, I would watch porn, I would do all these behaviors because I didn't feel my life force.
Yes.
So healthy shame for me now is, after a lot of inner work, emotional work, is feeling it and feeling the shame, and like Paula said, like a healthy shame, where I can actually turn it into where I take care of the inner critic, the little boy that's getting beat up, so I have an image in my mind where I'm actually, when shame comes up, I can feel it, I can take care of the little boy, I got your back. And so the healthy response is actually to transform, because I can feel the shame now.
Yep. Totally. Yep, beautiful responses, guys. Then the next one is disgust. Can you describe what healthy and unhealthy behaviors look like in response to disgust? And at its extreme is hatred.
Well, the healthy response seems similar to me to shame, where you see an error in your own behavior, in someone else's behavior, and you say something to try to correct it.
Yeah, often we combine shame and disgust a lot, and it turns into an emotion that's like, or feeling that's like contempt. Like we have contempt for someone. For me, they're quite distinct though. Because the example that I gave was, in a healthy response, was smelling that something that's really toxic to us, like off food. So there's a real sense of toxicity. And it's not made up, like the color of my skin makes me a toxic person or a poisonous person. It's not made up. It's real. Like, if I eat this food, I'm probably going to have to go to hospital to get my stomach pumped, or I'm going to be really, really ill.
Well, following that, then the unhealthy behavior would be basically thinking something's toxic when it's not. So maybe a good description of that would be over judgmental.
Yep. Yep. In fact, for me, any form of judgment, which for me is an observation loaded with emotions, like an emotional bomb attached to an observation that's projected outwardly. That for me is judgment, and any form of any emotional bomb that is put onto information is us weaponizing emotions, which is unhealthy for me.
Could disgust be a warning in a healthy sense, and in an emotionally healthy sense? What I mean by that is that I had a very unfortunate relationship with a very toxic boss that worked in a very sly and narcissistic way for many years, that it was very difficult to navigate my way through that relationship, because he was very subtle and sly. So it was kind of like chipped off bit by bit. It chipped me off bit by bit, and when eventually it came to a conclusion after like 4 years, the emotion that I could identify at that conclusion was this disgust. I was disgusted now reflecting back on that behavior. But that wasn't like the primary thing all the way through. It was more like confusion and fear. And it was like, it was quite hard to navigate my way into the acceptance of the emotion being disgust. Had I been able to like identify that earlier, it might have been a warning to me earlier on in that piece to not have to let it get to the finale that it landed up having.
Yes, totally. Yeah. We become acclimatized to the energy of disgust as children in the family circle, through school. Like, it's very commonly accepted as, like, let's say, a form of punishment. So like, we're disgusted, you're to the side, and like, I'm just gonna leave you there until you behave yourself. And if we had a healthy response to disgust, it's like, I can feel that there is a toxic environment here. There is a toxicity in this relationship that I'm continually getting hurt over and over and over again. Just like eating spoiled food over and over and over again, it's not healthy to us. And yet we often find ourselves with seemingly no choice in these moments. Like, we're in a family home, we're growing up, we're children. I can't do anything about that. And there's just disgust everywhere. Or I'm at work, I'm in this job, and my boss is toxic, is slimy, and I can't do anything. Like, I feel trapped. It's a very healthy response to feel that. Because then we can take action about that much earlier. It's like you smell spoiled food, and it's like, okay, that's straight in the bin. We don't want to linger around, but because we're acclimatized to it, we're like, okay, let me see how I can deal with this. I'll let this thing hurt me time and time and time and time again. This thing or this person hurt me. There's also a sense of like dehumanization in it. So this element of disgust is, it's like we do that towards off food, but when we do that towards a person, we tend to like dehumanize them. It's like, it's very difficult to find empathy in that space. Yeah. Any other comments on disgust? I mean, I think when it comes to hatred, we're really seeing it all play out, all the behaviors in response to this energy playing out right now and what we're seeing in the world. Healthy response to sadness, an unhealthy response to sadness.
For me, healthy response now is like crying and just embracing the emotion and going through it. And unhealthy for me was like more than like suppressing the sadness, and like if you feel it coming up, like fighting it and pushing it down and swallowing it, not giving it any place to exist or express itself.
Yep. I think sadness is a more self-explanatory one these days. Healthy and unhealthy response to happiness. I think we all know the healthy, but what's the more unhealthy one?
Would it be if we cling to that state as something desirable?
Yep.
Creating the clinging and the aversion situation, as opposed to seeing it as just another state of being?
Yep. Totally. We're sort of chasing it. We set an intention to be happy a lot. Anything else on unhealthy? There's one I'll throw in is this emotion of overjoy. And it's like when we have a friend, like we have something that we're doing, we're in the middle of, and a friend calls us and says, let's go to so-and-so. And you get into this state of overjoy. Oh my God, that sounds so amazing. And you sort of drop everything and you run off. That's like, it can be a little unhealthy. We're sort of getting very close to this overjoy.
Something
I was thinking about self-indulgence.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Something that came up for me, and I'm not sure if this is related, but I grew up with family members, particularly the women, would create an atmosphere of positivity. Like it was a false positivity or a false happiness, and just pretended everything was happy.
Right.
And so I think that's related.
Yep. And then the last one of surprise. I've said before, it's not really like there's much shadow in surprise, but can anybody think of any unhealthy or healthy behaviors in response to the element of surprise, the emotion of surprise?
Well, could it be that when we're surprised, it's that we, weren't actually aware of the entirety of whatever was unfolding in that moment? So the element of surprise in an unhealthy way is when it gets met and it's like, wow, I was totally blind to that, which points towards a lack of awareness, which means awareness was narrow and not broad.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that like the healthiness of surprise, one of the self-protective mechanisms that I say is built into the body, the element of surprise, is it kind of jars us out of patterns of behavior. It's like we're sort of taken aback and we're sort of forced in a way to just stop. And in this busy going world, we often don't take that as a point of like, it was something that just shocked me and jarred me out of what I was doing. There's a usefulness there. Yeah.
What's coming up for me is I was on a hike like 30 minutes ago and rushing back to get to this call. But on the hike, right at the end, I came across a snake. And just right in front of me. And snakes surprise me. and they scare me.
Yeah.
And but I felt it,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like a big nasty one that was going to kill me or something, but I can feel the surprise. I can feel the adrenaline pumping through my body. And
Yes.
the old response would have been just panic,
Yeah.
fear,
Yeah.
and then so healthy response is that I did grow up with a family member who was scared to death of snakes, and a mother, and so their response was drama. The drama in the family would just be completely like a day or two of drama, of snake fear. So
Yeah.
drama is, for me, the unhealthy response.
Yeah, totally. I think that surprise brings up something in us. It's like it brings up another emotion often. And fear is often definitely one of them that comes up a lot. And that's what I'm saying. It sort of jars us. It's like the universe jarring us into this place. It's like, take reflection of this. How are you doing with this emotion? How are you doing with that emotion? Okay. Excellent. We've gone through all of stage 1. You're now all experts in stage 1. Stage 2. So stage 2 in a martial arts perspective is where we're not just mentally understanding how punches and kicks are thrown, we're actually doing them, right? We're actually throwing a punch at a bag, we're doing the motion, we're kicking, we're practicing a block. So it's like, in a lot of martial arts, they call it different forms, like Tai Chi forms, karate forms. It's a form, it's a practice of movement. Movement being the key, and practice also being the key. And from an emotional martial arts perspective, it's about beginning to really work with the limitations in our body. So really starting to understand our conditioning. It's starting to remember our trauma and to start to be able to unpack it in a way that I would call is emotionally intelligent. So you have this mental and feeling centered capacity to start to become aware of what emotions you're putting out there. So like if I just said to my child, hey, stop, it's like, don't run across the road, and because the car's coming, it's like, oh, I'm stopping and I'm reflecting and I'm saying, oh, I just threw a punch there and it was kind of loaded with fear. Or I'm sending a message to a lover or whoever it might be, and I'm sort of saying, oh, you're not being a responsible person. That's awful. Like, how could you think like that? How could you do this? And then if we take a step back, we're like, wow, I just loaded that message with shame, and I just threw a punch. I threw a kick. I just kicked you in the groin with that message. And so what we're starting to do now is, instead of like moving our body with no awareness of how we're moving, we're actually like, okay, I'm practiced in this emotion of shame, let's say. And so because I'm so practiced at it, and I know how it feels, what it feels like, it's an internal thing, I know when I'm throwing one. And when someone else is throwing one, I can see them throwing that. I can see them reaching out and pushing. I can see that. I can feel it. I know you're doing this. I know you're trying to fight me. Or if someone's putting out disgust in the form of judgment, or we are doing that, we can sort of see ourselves in that, engaged in that activity. So it's very much about awareness, catching ourselves in the act, catching others in the act, and calling it, being able to call it out. both for ourselves and for other people. We're like, oh, there's shame here. Oh, there's disgust here. Oh, there's fear here. I can see the fear. Oh, you're angry. Oh, you're sad. Oh, you're happy. So we're not just restricted to sad and happy and angry. There's a lot more words that we can pull into. And then we start to be able to pull into the secondary emotions. I can feel your jealousy. I can sense your doubt. I can feel your remorse. Or I don't feel my remorse. So there is a level of what I call emotional intelligence. And it's like, an expert in stage 2 would be someone who can watch a movie or a TV series, and when an actress or actor is playing out an emotion, you can read what the makeup of those primary emotions are. That's emotional intelligence. So yeah, and then you can kind of tell what's mine and what's someone else's, more so. Because you're like, I'm watching the movie and all this acting that's going on, all these emotions that are being played out, this is all their stuff, right? But if it's triggering me in a certain way, what's mine? So we start to have more discernment about, am I throwing the punch? Is someone else throwing the punch? Am I throwing a punch in response to someone else's punch? Are they throwing a punch in response to my punch towards them? Let's get into the exercises. I notice we've got 5 minutes left. First question is, can you feel deeply each emotion, each of the primary emotions? I'm going to go through each one and just take a reflection, just let's say in this past week, about how deeply you were able to feel each of these emotions, or see them in action. The first one, anger. When did you see it? Did you express anger this week? How angry were you able to get? Should you have expressed anger this week? Was there something that should have made you angry? Is there something that happened to you or to someone else that should have made you angry, that you weren't angry to? How were your behaviors in response to anger? Were they healthy or unhealthy? Was it numb? And I'm not sure I'll invite responses to this because this is going to go online, but I just invite you to just consider that for yourselves and maybe write it down if you like. What about fear? How deeply were you able to feel fear this week? Did you feel any fear at all? Did you see fear? Did you notice it around you? What intensity were you able to say came up in terms of fear? In the moments that you witnessed, should fear have come up more strongly? Was there something that you should have been scared of and felt scared of that you could have taken action on that you didn't? Did you pressure cook a fear? And then I would invite you to do the same with shame. Was there something that someone said, did towards you that made you feel ashamed? How deeply were you feeling it? Was it your stuff or was it theirs? Did you hurt someone this week? And was that how you felt shame? What intensity were you able to feel that? Was there a moment where you think you hurt someone, but you weren't able to feel shame or remorse? Did you pressure cook a shame? Do you tend not to let shame overwhelm you? Let's say parents constantly talking you down, boss constantly talking you down, partner, ex-partners constantly talking you down, and just didn't feel anything. And then what about disgust? How much disgust were you able to feel? How much did you feel like you needed to punish people this week, punish others, or punish yourself? Did you pressure cook a disgust? People have disgusted at you a lot, again and again and again, and just, I don't feel anything. And then you can do the same thing with sadness. Happiness is lesser so. We generally are able to identify happiness more easily. And as you start to begin to ask yourselves these questions through the day, through the week, we really start to bring awareness to our conditioning and the conditioning of others. And when we can understand these, which I call limitations of our emotional body, we begin to have what I would just call more emotional intelligence. And that's a stage 2 expert. Now, a stage 3 expert I won't go into because we're sort of out of time, and we'll do this next week. But the stage 3 expert is in martial arts, beginning to spar with a partner. So you've practiced all the punches, you have really good form with your movement, and now you're starting to spar. You're starting to really dance with another person in that martial sense. And from an emotional sense, I call this emotional intimacy. You're starting to go beyond emotional intelligence, and you're going into a space of intimacy. You're starting to be able to get really close with another person in throwing and receiving punches, throwing and receiving kicks. And from an emotional sense, it's like we're able to resonate with another in our anger. And we're able to work with it. So we're not afraid to call out, hey, I didn't like the way you did this. And the other person shuts down. We're like, I didn't like the way that you did this. Well, I didn't like the way you did this either. And you start to have a conversation. There's a martial arts there in that from an emotional intimacy perspective, you're not backing down from a punch that's thrown. You're able to engage, and you're able to dance with it. And in that dance, you're able to much better find empathy in that space. So whatever you need to say is able to be said. and received. Receiving the anger, sending the anger. The same thing with the fear. I'm scared about this. Yeah, I'm feeling scared about this too. We both dive into the fear. Or the shame. I have an addiction with this, blah, blah, blah. Oh, whoa, let's talk about it. Rather than, well, wow, I need to reevaluate my relationship with this person and get out. It's like, no, I'll hold space to talk to this. I'm feeling ashamed, and let's go into it. Let's dive deeply. That's the act of choosing to, like choosing a sparring partner, but this is from an emotional perspective. Now we've got the intelligence, right? We've got the literacy. So we've got stage 1 and stage 2, stage 3. So I'll go into this next week. Stage 4 is on strategy, but we'll leave this for next week. Are there any questions? Was this format sort of better with these exercises and this? Like, yeah. Yeah, if you have any questions or any comments, feedback, how you'd like it to sort of evolve, I'd say we probably have maybe 3 sessions left to go. I mean, there's plenty more, but I think we're really covering a lot of ground quite quickly. So if you have a sense of like, I'd really want to talk about this, I'd really want to talk about that, or I want more exercises on this, we can start getting more deeply into the exercises space, which I'm not entirely sure I would put a lot of that stuff online at all, because I mean, yeah, for privacy reasons. Really the bulk of what I wanted to cover was just simply like the educational piece and just some tools, easy tools that we can all use that are more around self-reflection and awareness. Okay. Alrighty. Well, thank you all for joining, and hopefully we see you next week. Enjoy your sleep and enjoy your day. All right.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Bye,
Thank you
peoples.
so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Bye.